I know what you're thinking. That 24 to 105, it's got some good range on it. But I also know what you're thinking. That Tamron 2875 has a 2.8, and I really like a 2.8. Which one do I get? It is a tough call. I happen to have both because I was having the same problem deciding between the two. So hopefully this video kind of gives some of you all an idea of which one of these two lenses might be a better choice for you. If anything, I think the Tamron might actually be a hair longer, but it's definitely a non-significant difference. But as you can see, the Tamron is definitely thinner. The 24 to 105 is a little more girthy and heavier, a little bit heavier. It's not, 24 to 105 is not an overly heavy lens, it's just a little bit heavier than the Tamron. And it does feel a little more front heavy on the camera, so that's a drawback. But then again, it has more of the reassuring feeling of quality to it, so that could be a perk. That being said, I don't think either of these lenses are particularly frail, and I actually had a bit of a bump with the Tamron. It was on a gimbal and somebody knocked it over. Fell right on the lens and the lens was totally fine. So even though this Tamron feels kind of plasticky, I don't think it's bad build quality or frail or anything like that. Okay, so these two are just to show the difference in bokeh you can get from 2.8 versus f4. These were actually both shot with the Tamron, but one is shot at f4 versus 2.8. The 2.8 is over here on the right. As you can see, as you'd expect at 2.8, you get a little more blur in the background. The suitcase here, this hi-hat stand, you know, just a little bit more blur than the f4 here over on the left, which of course is what you would expect, but just to kind of show that. Not a massive difference, but a difference. The next set are for just kind of showing the difference between 24 millimeters and 28 millimeters. You know, on the Sony, you can go out to 24. That is on the right here. As you can see how this shot's framed, we're getting all these cars in the frame here on the right versus at 28, we're starting to crop in on them. And same over here on the left of the frame, you know, you're getting this Jeep, this black Jeep in the frame here versus on the Tamron at 28 here. You don't get any of that, and you're even starting to cut off a little bit of the this white car. You know, the truck you see obviously more in the frame. Nothing surprising there. 24 is wider than 28. These two of this colorful building in Bushwick, just to kind of compare some of the image quality. If we got to the corner of the frame, I kind of consistently thought the Sony had the slight edge in the corner of the frame, and hopefully this will show that as well. I mean, we're going all the way out to the edge here. But if we look at, say, this eyeball, our starfish friends here, the Sony is on the left, the Tamron is on the right. As you can see, the Sony getting a little more detail in there at the corner of the frames. They're both good and pretty comparable, but I would give the slight edge to the Sony in terms of corner sharpness, and that was something I saw pretty consistently. If we get a little more towards the center of the frame, center-ish, let's see. They're pretty neck and neck in the center of the frame. If you look around these guys here, maybe the Tamron, judging by this particular shot, and that did seem to be the case a lot of times, the Tamron might be ever so slightly sharper at the center of the frame than the Sony. One thing I noticed, so we have the Sony on the right this time, the Tamron on the left. The Tamron is a little bit warmer, and I saw that consistently. The images coming from the Tamron had slightly warmer colors. The Sony's colors were slightly cooler. To my eyes, the Sony was more accurate to what I was actually seeing at that time in terms of, you know, warm versus cool. The Tamron has a very subtle warm cast to it. It's not a significant difference, and you could push, you know, either one of these photos towards each other in terms of colors, so it's not that big of a thing, but just an interesting thing to observe. The Tamron has a slight warm vibe to the colors. And, you know, image quality overall pretty comparable. This is not, you know, a tripod identical shot, so there's some variables at play, but, you know, pretty comparable, I'd say. In this particular one, again, and to me, it looks like the Sony over on the right, you know, a little more detail on the edge on the Williamsburg Bridge here, but you know, pretty comparable. If we get more to the center of the frame, yeah, almost neck and neck. I'd say they're almost identical at the center of the frame here, but again, this was more to show the color. This isn't the perfect shot to show the difference between these two because, you know, it wasn't on a tripod and there's a whole lot of variables. This is just to show the close focus macro capability of the two lenses. We got the Sony on the left and the Tamron on the right. As you can see, you can get closer in with the Tamron, which is cool. So if you're like landscape is your thing, cityscapes, and you're in well-lit situations, I think 24-105 is probably a little bit better for you. Whereas the Tamron maybe lends itself a little bit more to photographing people and portraits and things like that. Although you can use, you know, any of these lenses for anything, but that's just my kind of take on it. Virtues of the two. Virtues of the 24-105. The range, 24 on the wide end and going out to 105, that's a really good range. This can be that kind of one and done lens you take with you on a trip. The only area it's not going to excel in is low light, so depending on what type of shooting you're doing. But let's say you're going on a trip and you predominantly are going to be shooting outdoors and shooting buildings and your, you know, significant other loved ones or family on the street and things like that during the day. I would say the 24-105, you could bring that as your only lens and be totally fine. And then if you want to, you know, shoot things indoors or in lower light situations, that is a situation that, you know, you maybe consider bringing a second prime with, or you'd have to weigh whether or not, you know, the f4 is going to be good enough for you in those situations. The 24-105 has stabilization in the lens, and I have an A7 III, which has the in-body stabilization, but stabilization is better when you have the lens stabilization. I did some handheld video with it and stuff, and you can definitely notice a difference. You know, the IBIS is great and everything, but the IBIS paired with the lens stabilization built into the 24-105 does give you a smoother result, and it's noticeable. I would say it's not a subtle difference. It's a difference. The lighter weight, it feels great on my A7 III. It feels really well balanced. The Tamron kind of feels more like what people thought the mirrorless thing was supposed to be originally, like these smaller, lighter cameras and lenses, and that was part of the appeal of the mirrorless. It feels like Tamron is kind of sort of adhering to that initial philosophy. And then the biggest advantage, and the most obvious one, is the extra stop of light. Having that extra stop can make all the difference in the world, or it can make basically no difference. If you're outside shooting in daylight, you don't really need that 2.8, in my opinion. You know, yeah, you can, it's better for like portrait stuff if you want to blur the background at a given focal range. That is true. But I will say with the 24-105, if you can, you know, rack it out to 105 and be at f4, the background separation and compression you're getting in, say, like a portrait or something like that, if you can step back far enough to be at 105 and get the subjects in the frame, I would say that it looks just as good in terms of like bokeh, background, dreamy, sort of that separation thing you're going for as the 28-75 at 75 and 2.8. If you don't think you really need that 2.8, or you're going to use that 2.8 that much, the 24-105 is totally the better lens for you. There's no, in my opinion. It's a little more expensive, and that is a drawback, but I wouldn't let a few $100 steer you away from it and towards the Tamron if you're someone that you think you're really going to appreciate that range more so than you are going to appreciate the extra stop of light you get with the Tamron. However, if you're somebody who wants that extra stop of light and you think you're probably going to appreciate that more than the extra range from the 24-105, then you should definitely get the Tamron, because if you want that 2.8, you know who you are and you know why you want it, and you're not going to be happy unless you get that 2.8. And for you, if that is you, the Tamron's the one that you should pick. Both great lenses, I like them both, and it pains me that I'm going to have to sell one, but I can't justify having two lenses with such a similar focal range. I like that 2.8, so I'm going to be keeping the Tamron. You know, I'm one of those guys that really likes having that 2.8, I guess more so than I do the extended range and the stabilization, but I'm really going to miss those things on the 24-105. So for me, I'm going to be keeping the Tamron. Not because it's the better lens. It's not the better lens, not at all. It's just because I like that 2.8 and I really value that a lot. So hopefully this can help you all pick the better lens for you, and you know, good luck with that. Like I said, you can't go wrong either way. You're gonna like both these lenses, you know, 100%. So whichever one you get, you'll be happy with, I guess. So that's enough for me. Thanks for tuning in. Give me a like and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. It helps me out. And until the next time, take care. Bye.